Hey guys, it's Steve here from Geek. Today I'm going to be showing you how to shoot your own textures out in the woods by yourself from scratch. So this is going to be a fun tutorial. Something that just jumped over there. It's going to be a fun tutorial, should learn a lot, should be informative. And don't mind the rooster crowing in the background. It's nature. Alright, so as you can see, I'm in a very beautiful place here in the woods, and there is plenty of potential beautiful textures to be shot. Now, if you follow me on Facebook or Twitter, you would see that I just recently created this scene here, and all the textures you see in this scene are shot in this little woods right here. And I'm going to be showing you exactly how I did that. Excuse any wind noise, it's been a little windy today, but I do have that dead cat on the mic. It's not a real dead cat, it's a little fuzzy. Forget it. Go on. We will be shooting rock textures, grass textures, tree textures, rock textures, grass textures, leaf textures, any sort of texture you can think of. We shoot them. Alright, so the number one most important thing I found when shooting textures is to make sure all your textures are shot in the shade. You cannot have any bit of sunlight on your texture because that will come in 3D, and if you have it on your texture already, it will look bad. Very bad. So don't shoot any textures in the sunlight. Make sure all your textures are in the shade. And if you're shooting a whole bunch of textures for one scene, keep them all consistent. Keep them all in the same amount of shade and keep them all looking the same. So two things you want to keep in mind with consistency in your textures is focal length. You will want to set your focal length to be a consistent at least 35, maybe even 55, depending on your lens. If you're using a phone camera, can't really do much about that, but if you can adjust it, I'd say 35 or more because you don't want that wide angle distortion on your textures. Another thing you can do is change your white balance. Keep your white balance consistent. Set it to something like cloudy or daylight is my favorite for outdoor shooting, and keep it at that through all your textures. That way it will look consistent throughout your whole scene and they'll all match perfectly. You don't want auto white balance. If you're using a phone camera, there's some manual apps you can download and then set your white balance on your phone. So don't complain about not having a good camera. You can still do it. Now here's a cool rock. This would make some good textures, but as you can see, the sun has decided to shine. So I'm not complaining, but I'm complaining. So what you want to do in this case is shadow your texture with whatever you can. Even your body will work. And make sure you shoot only in the shadow, like I was saying. Shadow shooting. Now another interesting problem you might have when shooting something like a rock, a tree, anything with round edges is that certain parts of the image will be focused, other parts will be blurry because they're out of focus. What you want to do is turn your aperture to a larger number. If you don't know what your aperture is, read it up, but it will take away some of the depth of field. It will remove some of the depth of field. It will give you a wider depth of field, in which case remove a lot of the blur on your image. Now, looks like the sun just disappeared for a second, so I'm going to shoot my texture here, my first texture here. A white balance set to cloudy. Keep in mind when you're shooting a texture like a rock or something to try and keep the texture consistent around the image. If you have a really bright spot and a really dark spot, that won't tile. And when we're shooting something like a rock, we want this image to be tieable. I'll be doing that later on in the video. So keep in mind that you want everything to look consistent from both sides of your image. So don't shoot something that looks really dark and really bright because it won't tile. You want a flat, nice looking texture. Do it somewhere where it will be the same color across the board. Now when you turn your aperture to something larger for a wider depth of field, you will have to crank your ISO. If you don't know what ISO is, it's the brightness of your scene. It also adds noise. If you don't know what it means and you want to know what it means, look it up. Otherwise, just find the setting on your camera and crank it up a bit. Alright, so here are a few of the textures I just shot. Not too bad looking. Definitely some good textures to use there. Let's go on to the next texture. Okay, so my next texture will be a bark texture. This tree has some cool flat textures across it, so it'll be an easy one to shoot and tile later. Some dead areas down here, you can shoot it if you want and have some variation, but I'm going to shoot some of this this bark texture. Just like the rock texture, it's kind of a curved surface, and you'll have some focused areas and out of focus areas unless you crank your aperture up nice and big, get some wider depth of field, and adjust the ISO as well, so it's all bright and sharp and ready to work with. Excellent. Now I'll show you how to shoot some grass and leaf textures that we'll be cutting out, adding an alpha channel to, and using in our scenes. So I found, unlike when you're shooting a rock or a tree texture, when you're shooting something like a leaf, you're going to want a nice shallow depth of field because it will cut out a whole lot easier in post. And if you have it nice and flat, there should be no out of focus areas, so you'll be good to go. Okay, so in this case, I think this nice flat dirt surface will work pretty well to shoot my green textures against. Having it out of focus in the background, this should cut out very easily in post. Photoshop. A few things real quick. Make sure your texture isn't wet. You don't want any reflections on your texture. You want it to be flat. Keep the texture as flat as possible. Keep it a good distance away from the ground that you're shooting on so you can have a nice depth of field. And shoot it. Okay, so I've shot a handful of textures now. You can continue shooting textures all day long. If you're going to be recreating a scene similar to the one around you, I recommend taking 100 or 200 pictures. And that way you have a lot to work with later, especially if you're not going to be able to get to that spot again. Shoot a lot of textures. You'll never regret it. After you're happy with all the textures you've shot, then you're ready to move on to post. So I hope you guys have liked, learned, loved, had fun shooting some textures, and I'll see you guys over on my desktop to take these photos to the next level, texturize them, tile them, alpha mask them, get them ready for some 3D work. Okay, out of the woods and on my desktop. I'm here in Photoshop, and I have handpicked a few of my favorite textures here that I shot that afternoon. They're all of them will work. Some of them will be easier than others. Here's some rocks that I shot off camera. And I'll start with this rock texture. And the goal is to tile this rock texture so it will tile seamlessly in our software like Blender, for example. And to do that, well, that's what I'm here to show you. First off, I'm going to go layer, new layer for background. All right, go ahead and do that. Now you can move it around and have some playability with it. And I'm also going to square it off so it is a square and not a rectangle. Same size on both sides, basically, so it tiles nicer. So, change the canvas size to be 44, just like the height, and there you go. Now you can also kind of place your texture how you want in here, back and forth, picking what will be the most consistent looking texture tile across your scene. So, that moss in the corner probably wouldn't tile too well, so I'll leave that out of it, and I'll go right about there. I'm just holding shift and sliding back and forth. So I think pretty much right in the middle is good. So there we go. And now what you also want to do is you'll have to crop it. So once you have it and you're happy with it, you'll have to crop it. So go select all, and then go crop. Boom. And basically that removes the play we had in the edges, but keeps it a complete square. So in this next step, it will all work perfectly. So before we can go to the next step, we have to find out what our dimensions are on this scene. So I'm going to go canvas size, and you want to find the pixels, and it's 3168 by 3168. Now, you're going to have to divide that in half, and if it's a complicated number and you don't want to do it, well, just use a calculator. Simple answer. So I'm just going to open up my calculator real quick here. Are you coming? There we go. And you just want to divide 3168 in half. There we go, by 2. And it's 1584. So 1584 is what we want. Remember that number, 1584, because now we're going to go to Filter, Other, Offset. And we want that 1584 number right there on both the horizontal and the vertical. And what this does is it basically offsets the image halfway to both corners which basically gives us all the corners here, and obviously now the image will tile, if it doesn't look bad, to, you know, this side up to there, and you can imagine it would tile perfectly, except for the ickiness you see in the middle here. Well, that's where the next step comes in, and that is going to be using our clone brush and patching it seamlessly. So you might want to zoom in a little bit so you can get a little more detailed in this situation. Grab your clone brush. I'm using Photoshop again. If you're using GIMP or whatever, it most likely has all these same options, so you could follow along still. And I'm just going to start grabbing some areas that look nice and seamlessly painting it across with a clone brush to make it one solid texture. So let's grab an area here and kind of paint this in. And let's take this dark stuff and match it up with some of this dark stuff up here to kind of blend that in nicely. And you can see how I'm working, just grabbing areas that kind of match each other in different parts of the scene and blending them in with it. So I have a brush at the size of 400 and some, and it's a fuzzy brush. Basically, you want something fuzzy to blend nicely, otherwise it still won't blend. And yeah, just start painting in. Hold down Alt, choose your section, and paint it in. That looks pretty good there. And a little bit more down here, kind of patch that in. Alright, just don't want it to look tiled, and you also don't want it to look repeated. So you have to kind of keep it looking natural, which sometimes is easy, sometimes can be a little tricky, but this seems to be working pretty easily. So let's just finish that off there. Grab a little of the dark stuff and blend it in over here. And we pretty much got it. That looks pretty good, actually. Maybe just pull this right there. And now you can see you have some dark areas and bright areas. Something you can do to kind of avoid that clashing too bad when it's tiled, because dark areas and bright areas, you try to avoid them when you shoot, but you can't always. So what you can kind of do to avoid too much of that is adjust the shadows and highlights. So I'm going to go Adjustments, Shadows and Highlights, and let's just kind of take the shadows up a little bit, and then take the highlights down a little bit, and you see you get a much flatter looking image that will tile better. You can see with the preview before and after, that will tile a whole lot better once you've taken out the shadows. So you don't want to go too much, but definitely helps. So you lose some of your color and stuff in the rock. You could always add that back in, but I might just go a little bit less than that. It should still tile pretty nicely. Preview before and after. Alright. So then if you want to do any color adjustments, you can do that now. I'm pretty happy with the way this looks, and if I wanted to tweak it, I would tweak it in my software like Blender. So we have a tileable image texture here that looks pretty decent, rock texture. So I'm ready to resize it. I'm just going to size it down to about 1024 by 1024. You can see it nice there. And I'll save it out as a PNG file, because PNGs are what I'd like to go to for textures. So I'll just go Finish Textures here. There we go. And save it out as a PNG. Simple. There is our first rock. Done and dusted, ready to be used. So that's how you do a tileable texture. Now I'm going to show you how to do something like a leaf. Alright, so this is going to be a little different because obviously we're not tiling it, but we want it to be alpha channeled so we can use it on a tree or something and have it cut out. So to do this, I shot it against a blurry background and whatnot, like I explained earlier. I'm just going to use my quick selection tool here, and believe it or not, this does quite a nice job just running around the outskirts. If you're using software that doesn't have a tool like this, well, you could use something like the sticky lasso or anything else like that. That will work, maybe just take a little bit more time. But there you go. It pretty much grabbed it all completely. And if you hold, I believe, Alt, you can remove areas, like that little hole right there. And then I'll just kind of tweak it back there. And that's it. No. But seriously, it's awesome. So with that selected there, I'm going to go crop, because we might as well crop it down to that. And then I'm going to go select inverse. So we inverse our selection, and before I do anything else, I'm going to go new layer from background. Alright, like I did before, and now I can delete the background. Alright, and that actually looks really good. If you had any sort of issues on your texture, you would take your eraser tool, and you would zoom in, and you'd tweak it. Like maybe just take a little bit of the dirt out right here, but I'm just being nitpicky. And you grab your eraser tool and a smaller brush size and go to work. But I'm actually pretty happy with the way the quick selection did. It won't always be this easy. This was an easy one to do, but you know, I got lucky. So there you go. There's a leaf texture. Again, if you wanted to do some of the shadows and highlights to make sure you don't have too many shadowed areas, and you could add in the shadows obviously in 3D, you might want to take out a little bit of the shadows there. That kind of helps. But voila. I might change the levels a little bit because it looks just a little bit overexposed. Maybe darken it a little bit. See what that looks like before and after. Alright. And our leaf is ready to roll. If you wanted it to go horizontal, or vertical I mean, instead of horizontal, you could do that. If you wanted to rotate it a little bit to straighten it, you could do that, which might be something that's smart to do. Rotate it just a little bit so the point is at the middle section. It makes it simpler when working in 3D. And then scale it down just a little bit, holding shift. But that's pretty good. Happy with that. And done. So you just resize it, image size, save it as true. Let's just go down to 1024 again. And save out your leaf texture. Now I'm not going to go through the process of saving out and making bump maps and normal maps and everything else. That is possible to do in Photoshop and probably GIMP as well. But this is more of a quick do-it-yourself, and I personally prefer creating bump maps and stuff just within Blender because I can adjust it on the fly and make little tweaks and stuff. Maybe it's not as whoops, this isn't rock. Maybe it's not as technically the best way to do it, but I like to do it that way. So you save out your leaf, you save it as a PNG, and it will have the alpha channel then if it's a PNG, and you're done. So that should do it. The same thing with like a flower. If you wanted to do it, it would be the same process where you're selecting the leaves, etc. And same thing with that. And same thing with the rocks for tiling. So that's basically the method, guys, right there. Now I'm going to switch over to Blender real quick here and just open up these textures to show you how this one tiles and how the alpha channel comes through. So, boom, Blender. So let's quick enable the import images as planes add-on because that will make things go a little quicker. Just go planes and enable this add-on real quick. There we go. Perfect. Delete the cube, go to top view, hit 5 to go into orthographic view, and I'm just going to go Shift A, add in images as planes, and let's just grab those images we just created there. Finish textures. I'll do the rock first. And let's bring it in as a, hold on, I want to switch to cycles. Boom. If you switch to cycles, you get some different options while importing images. So with that same add-on enabled, you can go Shift A, images as planes. And now you can see you can choose the material settings here. And I'm just going to go with an emission in this case, because I'm doing the rock and there's no alpha channel, so I don't need the transparent. So open that up, and if I go rendered, you can see our texture. So let's see if it tiles nicely. I'm just going to bring up the UV image editor real quick here, tab into edit mode, and then open up the UV image editor. You can see our UV image here. Let's grab that rock in there. Now if I scale it up, you can see it's tiling. And yeah, in this case it looks a little tiled because we have the white areas and stuff. But you can see that it's tiling where we seamed it, and it's not too bad. If you didn't go quite so crazy tiled and kind of offset it a little bit too, it definitely doesn't look too bad. And if you're in a closer up view, boom, you're tiled. You're tiled and you can't see any of the seams. So not bad. There's our rock texture. And now I'm going to quick open up the leaf texture. So just move that to the side for now and Shift A, import images as planes. Let's grab that leaf. Before we go any further, I'm going to choose emission and transparent, so it comes in with the alpha. And then you also want to choose this right here. This is important. Use alpha, and I'll go pre-multiplied in the alpha mode. Make sure you check that, because that is important. All right, import images as planes, and boom, there's our leaf ready to be used. So very simple, and you get a nice looking texture right off the bat. And now, like I said, I prefer to add the bump maps and stuff in the materials within cycles. I know if you created them in Photoshop, you'd bring them into Blender and do it the same way, but I like being able to adjust it on the fly, and maybe it's not the correct way to do it, but it gives me good enough results that I'm always happy with it. So that's why I do that. But there you go, guys. There is how you create your own textures. Yeah, that's it. I don't need to ramble on because I ain't gonna say anything else intelligent. Hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial. Hope you guys enjoyed creating your own textures. And if you create some cool textures, please show me them. I want to see them. Yes. That's it for me, guys. And I'll see you later. Bye-bye.